Well, history teaches us a lot of things, including unsolved things, mysteries, conspiracies.
Eventually, though, sooner or later, they come out in the open. That's what we're here to talk to you about today.
Let's get into it.
Starting off our list today, we have the theory that the United States actively worked to discredit domestic political operations they deemed disruptive. Well, obviously, that was true. And it was called Operation COINTELPRO. From 1956 to 1971, the FBI's counterintelligence program worked to discredit, disrupt, and neutralize anything they saw as a threat to the political stability of the United States. Or, in fewer words, anything that went against the predetermined norm. The operation involved using methods either not regulated or straight up not allowed by the law to thwart many socio-political movements, perhaps the two biggest of which would be the fight for civil rights, which were eventually granted in 1964, and the fight for Puerto Rican independence, which, as you may know, never happened. The operation was revealed in 1971 after confidential files were stolen from an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, and subsequently released to the press. More information was then obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, and the program was eventually shut down. Or so they say.
Probably heard of people intentionally ingesting tapeworms back in the day in order to lose weight. Sounds like an old wives' tale or some kind of legend, but no, this really was a thing. So it's the early 20th century, and there's this new revolutionary diet going around. Long before keto or carnivore or any of the other long list of diets, nearly endless really, that we have today, there was simply the tapeworm, a slimy parasitic worm that can live in the intestines of animals, including humans. Now, somewhere along the line, someone got the bright idea that if you swallowed a tapeworm, it would hatch inside of you, grow into a full-sized worm, and then feast on whatever you were eating. Yeah, some people really saw this as a shortcut to weight loss. And I mean, I guess it technically is, but it's pretty easy to see the dangers here. You kind of do need calories to live, right? Tapeworms actually kind of caught on though. There were even companies that sold tapeworm eggs as diet pills. If you want to get healthy, it's really best to just eat a balanced diet, exercise regularly, and, avoid ingesting parasites.
Next up, we have Watergate, the political conspiracy theory that gave rise to so many others. During the presidency of none other than Richard Nixon, which lasted from 1972 to 1974, there was a significant amount of political controversy, which ultimately led to Nixon being removed from office. He resigned, but if he didn't, they would have given him the boot. On June 17th of 1972, a break-in occurred at the Democratic National Committee headquarters located in the Watergate office building in Washington, D.C. A break-in which the public sincerely believed that Nixon had orchestrated in order to obtain political documents that might benefit his political career, which he did. But the 5 robbers sent to do the deed were caught in the act, and so now I'm talking about it. At first, authorities disregarded the public's speculation of Nixon. That was until large sums of money began making their way out of the White House and into the pockets of Nixon's co-conspirators. While neither Nixon nor his administration ever fully admitted to actually orchestrating the break-in, they were caught red-handed in the cover-up, and that's enough of a confession for me.
Conspiracy theories about public figures faking their own deaths is really nothing new. This is something that's been going on for thousands of years, actually. Take the death of Nero in 68 AD, for example. There were conspiracy theories at the time that Nero had actually faked his own death and was just hiding somewhere. One of the most notorious emperors in ancient Rome was, of course, Nero. This guy was famous for being a bit of a tyrant. He wasn't exactly popular with everyone, and his reign ended in a pretty dramatic way. Nero died on June 9th in 68 AD, at just 30 years old, after being declared a public enemy by the Senate. But soon after his death, rumors started spreading that Nero hadn't actually died, and had just faked his own death, living in hiding, plotting, and scheming before he would eventually make a grand re-entrance. A lot of conspiracies were that he fled to the east. Now, of course, he never did return, and most historians agree that Nero did just die. There were witnesses, his body was cremated, and his successors wasted no time in seizing power.
Next up, we have the conspiracy theory revolving around the Gulf of Tonkin incident. In early August of 1962, two U.S. destroyer ships stationed in the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam reported that they had been fired at by unprovoked North Vietnamese forces, which subsequently led to an increase in the military presence in Indochina and the president at the time, President Lyndon B. Johnson, being given the go-ahead by the United States Congress to take any measures he deemed necessary to retaliate against Southeast Asia in the name of international peace and security. Here's the thing. Many people believe that the attack on the US destroyer ships, said to have been orchestrated by unprovoked North Vietnamese forces, were faked in an attempt to open the floodgates to direct military involvement in Vietnam. Well, that's partly true. While the attack wasn't faked, it also wasn't unprovoked either. According to declassified documents, the US had been providing support for South Vietnamese attacks on a nearby island, and the North Vietnamese forces were simply responding to the threat.
In 1967, the Prime Minister of Australia disappeared while swimming near Port C Victoria, and after 5 days of searching, it was ruled that he had died, most likely an accidental drowning, but some people weren't convinced. There are some pretty wild conspiracies about what may have happened to Holt. One theory is that he was killed, either a target of the CIA or North Vietnam. Probably my favorite, though, is that he was a spy. In 1983, a controversial novel called The Prime Minister Was a Spy by Anthony Gray was released. In the book, Gray outlined his belief that Harold Holt had actually been a spy for the Chinese government and that he dove under the water where two Chinese military divers transported him to a submarine before making their way to China. Or, you know, maybe he just drowned. What's more likely?
Next up, we've got Operation Chaos, a domestic spy project carried out by the Central Intelligence Agency that targeted U.S. citizens between the years of 1967 and 1974. The project was established by the current president at the time, President Lyndon B. Johnson, and it was later expanded under Nixon. You know, the two guys previously mentioned in earlier points for partaking in political scandals. Anyways, the point of the espionage operation was to discover possible foreign influence on domestic protest movements such as the race equality movement and the anti-war movement. The operation involved many different methods of targeting Americans who appeared to oppose current policies. Letters sent between the US and the Soviet Union were examined, and those writing them were placed on a watch list. Undercover agents were placed within domestic radical organization groups and also sent to work with college administrators, campus security officers, and local police to identify worrisome individuals. So basically it was like Big Brother before the internet, and the people called it, and they were right.
One of the biggest historical mysteries is the location of Cleopatra's tomb and the exact circumstances of her death. There are tons of conspiracies surrounding both. So the story goes that after Cleopatra's lover, Mark Antony, lost a big battle against Octavian, she feared capture and humiliation and decided to end it all by letting a poisonous snake bite her. But there are other theories suggesting that she was actually killed. As for her tomb, that's a whole other mystery. For as legendary a figure as she is in history, it's kind of wild that her tomb has never been found. Like, archaeologists have been searching for centuries. It's assumed to be somewhere near Alexandria, where she ruled, hidden under maybe layers of sand in the desert. There's always this hope and excitement that one day her tomb will be found. It would help solve some of those lingering questions about her death, plus I would probably be filled with treasure. That kind of makes me wonder, though, if it actually was found a long time ago and just kind of kept a secret.
Next up, we've got the Lavon Affair, aka Operation Susanna. The operation was a failed Israeli covert mission designed to undermine the Muslim Brotherhood and Egyptian communists. In the summer of 1954, as part of a false flags operation, which are like organized attacks carried out by governments and then they blame it on other people, a group of Egyptian Jewish people were recruited by the Israeli military intelligence to plant explosive devices inside of Egyptian, American, and British-owned public places such as cinemas, libraries, and American educational centers. The operation was designed not to be fatal. Explosives were to be hidden in the establishments and then set off after the buildings had been emptied for the night. But it came to an end when 4 operatives did die during a mission, and their overseer subsequently alerted Egyptian authorities. The Israeli government publicly denied any involvement in the explosions and maintained their position all the way up until 2005, when surviving agents were awarded certificates of appreciation by the Israeli president Moshe Katsav.
The disappearance of the 9th Legion is one of the most fascinating mysteries in ancient Roman history. The 9th Spanish Legion was a legion of the Imperial Roman Army. Records of them date all the way back to the 1st century BC, but after 120 AD, there are no records of them. We still don't know for certain what happened. The Legion had been stationed in Britain after it had been invaded by Rome. The most likely theory is that they were wiped out in battle, of course, somewhere on Britain's northern frontier against Celtic tribes, most likely in modern-day Scotland, known at the time as Caledonia. They would have been far from home and battling in unfamiliar terrain. Now, another theory is that the 9th Legion wasn't completely wiped out, but just disbanded or were relocated by the Roman authorities and just integrated into different legions, but that's not as fun an idea. Did you learn anything? Do you just have more questions in your head now?
These tend to raise more questions than they do answers half the time because they're conspiracy theories. We already feel like we have the answers, but then when people admit to these outlandish, horrible things, it makes you kind of question way more.
So, don't put away all your tinfoil just yet.
Yeah, maybe double down.
Maybe double down. Oh, we doubled down today. There's 2 of us doing this video. All right, I've been your host, James.
James can count. See ya.